I love inks, and Storytime inks are an acrylic superfluid satin finish ink. It's actually the very same acrylic paint or ink that is inside my paint pens. And the formula is fabulous for using just on its own as is from the cute little tubes that also have a little needle tip. But you can also fill your own markers, spray bottles, or any other lovely accessory that you wanted to use. This also means you can mix your own colours as well as use the gorgeous colours that they come in. There's different sets that we have on the website. They're grouped in mixing sets with some gorgeous accessory colours that go with them. But of course, you can mix them together, mix whatever colours you like on the page, or even mix them just as you would with any normal paint. The colours have got really super brights from neon pinks right through to neutrals, black and white. And although it's not a super important detail, naming colours is something that I absolutely adore doing. So the names are, of course, from some of my favourite stories, hence Storytime Ink. We're telling stories with our paint. And I adore stories that have a girl as the central focus. So the themes are going to revolve around Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and Snow White. These were plucky girls. They had to face their fears and face the world and get on with it. So in this video, I've pulled together a few ideas of how you can use your Storytime super fluid inks. Before we add the inks to any other vessels, you can just use them, just sprinkling them straight from the tube. The tube does have a fine point, which helps control the amount of ink that's coming out. And if that ever gets blocked, this is an acrylic ink, so if there's air to it, if you left the lid off, and it got a little bit blocked, all you need to do is just pop a needle in there just to help clean the spout. And because this ink, the formula, does have that little bit of a satin or a gloss, slight gloss property, it helps it to sit on the surface. So on this piece of watercolor paper, I've got all sorts of layers of other color. And to add a nice little splopple of colors, I can just sprinkle my Storytime inks just straight over the top. What I also love to do with them is to mist them, to spray them. So I've just got some of my little spray bottles here. I've added a mixing ball to my spray inks, and I'm just using a little bit of tissue to help me lever off that needle tip, and I'm putting the whole of that bottle in there. You can just squirt it with the tip on there. I've dedicated a whole bottle to make another mist. This colour is called Evil Queen. And all I need to do is make sure that I've given it a little shake. As with all of these acrylic inks, they do need to be activated. Give it a little shake, and I'm putting some lace down, and I'm going to spray through that lace with my black ink. I'm usually fairly careful when I'm spraying with really dark colours, but wow, it can give such a fabulous impact of colour. Now, the other really cool thing is when you layer a couple of colours. So I'm going to put blacks down, some white. I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of yellow there. If I let these colours dry in between, which they dry very, very quickly, I get really lovely effects as they sit with each other and sit over the top of each other rather than mixing with each other, which they will if they're just normal inks, water-soluble inks. These are going to work very, very differently, and if you're putting your colours down, they can be mixing with each other, so you're making other colours. Oh, it's just a really fun process. Now let's also add the ink to some of my ink brushes or water brushes. Usually there's water in these and you use them to watercolour, but I love to add ink inside all of my water brushes. And just keep in mind with the misters, with the brushes, with whatever we're using, it is acrylic, and when acrylic dries, it's waterproof and it does form like a plastic layer. That is what acrylic paint is. So you just need to remember to recap everything really well. Don't leave things caps open and lids off, and all will be fine. Now you can add a mixing ball to these as well if you wanted to. All the mixing bowl does is help activate things a little bit more quickly. But I find with the markers, you don't really need it. I think it's great in the mister bottle because you've just got a bigger vessel there and more ink. It's just fun. A lovely thing about these, though, is that you can mix your own colours, as I've mentioned. So I'm just mixing up some more beiges, so I've got more skin tones to play with as I create. Just remember to label your little recipe. I've actually got swatching stickers specifically for this on my website because you'll never remember in a week's time. And what happens if you make a fabulous ink colour and then you can't remember what it is that you used? So I'm using a couple of techniques here. I'm just in a journal that I've made that's got a variety of different papers from my paper packs. I'm just putting down various colours from the Storytime. I've got Hi-Ho, I've got Dormouse, Auntie M, mixing them. I've made my own mixture. I'm taking it from the bottle. I'm using paintbrushes. I'm using the markers that I've made. All of them are going to work. And I'm creating these little bases that I'll then let dry. Now, I'm creating the little faces like this so it's an example of how you can use the Storytime ink. But what I think is even better is to use my Joyful Gesso or some of my other really matte paints to get the little face bases down and then use the Storytime inks for these details like I'm starting to create now. This will work just fine, but the Storytime ink does have a slight satin finish and I love to use watercolour and coloured pencils to start to add details. And it will receive these, but a matte paint will do it even more. So it's just different ways of working, but I want to show you that how versatile the ink is and that you can certainly work this way as well. So you can mix all of these types of acrylics, my Joyful Gesso, the charismatic paints, matchmakers with the Storytime inks. These are all acrylics, or mix them with any other brand of paint as well. They're all friends. They're all sisters from the same family. And while I'm letting the hair of these girls dry, let's give them something to wear by using our little Storytime ink misters. Just spraying through a beautiful piece of lace that a very good friend sent me as some happy mail. If you want to make mixed media artists happy, a little piece of lace will absolutely brighten their day. Now that everything is dry, I'm going to add some details with my ink brushes that I've made. Now I'm editing this video so that you can get the whole experience of Storytime inks as quickly as possible. But if you want to see more of drawing faces, of this all happening in real time, this is a live stream that appeared on my Facebook page. I also live stream regularly in my Jane Davenport Mixed Media Facebook group. So they're all free to join. They're just fun. Some people are on Facebook just for those groups. And I also have online workshops where I teach you in detail on how to draw and creating backgrounds and drawing animals and just all sorts of mermaids, fairies, all sorts of things. And I also have several books that I've written that all show you those sorts of details. And every different tool that you use, whether it be the ink in the water brush or the ink on a palette and mixing colours and then using it with a paintbrush. I'm using one of the brushes from the Brush Ballet. This is the On Point set. And when I want to draw with paint, these are the brushes that I use. It's most like a pencil. And they give you those painterly strokes, which are going to sit nicely with the very painterly expressive lines that I've got happening in the hair and the general looseness and freedom that's on the rest of these pages. I could also use my pinpoint paint pens or any art supply, but they've got a more rigid, more controllable line, whereas when I'm working with brushes, you're going to keep that loose. I mean, this is just how I feel and how I work, but I can just push and pull on that nib and get different sizes of line. It just has a different way of working. So I've just used the ink brush that I've made, and now I'm using one of my pinpoint paint pens. This is the finest of my paint pens. These ones have a solid nylon nib, and I'm going to get lovely curvy lines or whatever it is that I want to draw, but it's just a different type of line. The way you hold it is different. The way you move your hand is going to be different. The way it feels on the surface is going to be different. All of these are positives because it just is going to give more variety of line and give the work more life, which are important qualities just to me as an individual artist or person who loves to create. I love having that variety of line, not even just for looking at, for doing, like the actual process of creating different types of lines with different tools just makes me so happy. So I wonder sometimes, it must just look like I'm using so many art supplies, and to some people that just must be mystifying. Why would you do that? You can do everything, maybe with watercolor or every one of us is different, and I am definitely a mixed media artist, and I like using everything. I'm an art supply addict. I love using all the different colors in all the different supplies. So let's add another whole art supply because it's just going to add variety. It's just going to look different. But I love colored pencils, just in general, just as a general statement, but I love adding colored pencils to my work because, again, they can feel very loose and carefree, and especially on the surfaces, so I can get just a different edge to the work. And you can see how nicely the Storytime inks play with other art supplies. Adding a little bit of watercolor, just very, very gently. I'm going to make it a bit more intense later, but I don't really know what I'm doing with these little bodies. And although I just started this off, this whole process off to demonstrate the Storytime inks, at this stage I'm really starting to like these four girls, and I was talking about what could their story be. I think they're at a caftan fashion parade. So I do need to add a little bit more zhuzh to their outfits. But I sort of started to think, oh my goodness, like the background, I have a colour called Inspired Indica Light, which is a particular kind of grey. It's the grey of the roofs of the houses in Paris, of the apartments. And I think it really helps soften the visual blow when you're using lots of colour, like I very often do. And I'm using the colour because playing with colour just does something very beneficial for me as a person. And then sometimes when that's all on the pages, it can be a lot. It can be a lot to look at. And I really do find that this Inspired Indica Light, this colour in the Joyful Gesso for the background, just helps bring those bright colours together. And after all these beautiful wafty, softy colours and lines, I need some hard detail. And I'm, again, using the Storytime ink, but it's in the pinpoint paint pens. I have many different types of paint pens in my art supply collections. I'm a little bit addicted to paint pens. I just think they're a marvellous tool. I'm a little bit addicted to inks. I'm a little bit addicted to pens in general, brushes, paints, watercolour, everything actually. And I adore an art supply that is versatile, that allows you, me, whoever is using it, to use it in all sorts of different ways. And it doesn't dictate to us what it wants to do. It lets us use it and play with it and have fun. And it's part of that process. And Storytime Ink is absolutely one of... How cute are these watercolours? Oh my goodness. Fairy dust, if you want to look them up on my website. They're gorgeous. So here are my little fashionistas at their kaftan photo shoot. The wind machine is blowing their glorious hair. That's all colour coordinated with the kaftans. Thank you for joining me on this little storytime adventure. These versatile, fun-loving inks are all available at janedavenport.com. They're exclusive to the website, actually. I really have fun making these videos, and I try and have a video for every single art supply from my various collections. But did you know it's like somewhere up around 600 different art supplies. I have to do another count, and it'll be different depending on when you watch this. Anyway, I love what I do, and I hope that you enjoy it as well. Bye.